and welcome to the Game Dev London podcast. I'm Roz Tuplin and I'm here today with
Muse and Lystrala.
Hi Muse. So Muse is a musician, a game dev, an artist and an author. She was born in Providence, Rhode Island and moved to New York where she founded Queenship Game Studio. And she's a multi-talented queen herself. She's been working on all aspects of the business, as we'll find out. So yeah, let's get started. So how did you get involved in games in the first place? What was your journey?
Well, I've always been a games enthusiast. I got my first console when I was 5 years old. And then later I, as part of my career in classical music, I founded an ensemble that performed video game and film music. And while I was doing that, I thought very seriously about getting into composing music for games. So that's really kind of how I got into game development to begin with, is in the musical aspect of it, and then everything else just kind of came later.
Sure. And how did Queenship Games get started?
So both my start in game development and Queenship kind of came from the same source. Are you familiar with the Ludum Dare game challenges?
That's right, yeah.
I started out doing those. Yeah, no, they're so great. So I started out doing those, I want to say a little over 2 years ago. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I think my first jam I composed for 2 different games, and the jam after that it was 3 different games. So to date, I've composed for 12 different games.
Wow.
Most of them via the Ludum Dare challenge. But the prototype for Queenship's first game was produced during a Ludum Dare game weekend. And we got to talking afterwards, and I was just like, what if we kept working on this? Because we got such a great response. We scored really high across, all the different ratings that you can give to Ludum Dare games. And then I was just like, what if we made games like this all the time? And ta-da! Here we are.
Amazing. It's kind of painful to kind of think about game jam at the moment, because obviously we're not all gathering in rooms and messing about and making games at the moment. Is that something that you miss?
I know.
Yeah. Very
much so. The last Ludum Dare I did participate, but it was not the same experience really. Half the fun was just, getting in a room with a bunch of other game devs and just, hammering out something. So I definitely missed, the tangible sense of community. But hopefully in the next year or so, we'll be able to go back to doing things normally, whatever that means now.
Yeah, right. Well, we will get back there. We'll get back there, I'm sure.
Eventually.
So when you were setting up Queenship Games, what kind of challenges were there? And were there like challenges that you expected and challenges that you didn't expect?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm really supposed to talk about this, but I think there weren't challenges that I didn't anticipate, but they were a little harder than I really expected. I mean, the game development community globally is very male dominated. So, as a woman in game dev, and especially as a woman of color in game dev, I definitely faced a little bit of pushback, like, you really sure about this? I really don't know, but it just made me a little more determined, because I'm very about disproving people.
Yeah, sure.
where my life goals are concerned. But the challenge I think I didn't expect was really living up to people's expectations. Like, there was one event I went to called the Troy 100 Forum. And the Troy 100 Forum is basically a showcasing of businesses. They have a different theme every time, and local businesses are invited to showcase and talk to people and all this sort of thing. So I was invited very unexpectedly to showcase what Queenship was doing and talk to the attendees about it. And we got a lot of really positive feedback after that. The most notable of which was, we're very proud to have an organization like this in Troy's community. And I was just like, oh boy, they have expectations now. Oh no. Mm-hmm. So I got a little bit anxious about that, because I didn't want people to think that we were going to be like, Blizzard overnight or something like that. But it did overall help us to produce a better product, I think. Just, taking that feedback and, really actively trying to meet people's expectations. And we were able to reach a lot of people with our first game. So overall, yay.
Yeah, I think having expectations on you is kind of necessary to keep you pushing yourself sometimes, and it's a big undertaking to start a business and to kind of put yourself out there in the world. So yeah, it's good to keep pushing. So in terms of getting the word out about your game, what kind of approaches did you take?
Well, I guess we started with the kind of the requisite social media and digital marketing stuff. I have a lot more experience in marketing than I do in game development, which is a little weird. I've been working in social media and digital marketing for about a decade and a half. So I kind of I don't want to say I had the market cornered in that department, but I sort of did. But I think the harder part was really, getting yourself into conventions and events like the Troy 100 Forum, and, just really having people test out the game and making sure that you're really listening to them when they say, I really like this, or I don't like this, or I was upset by this, that sort of thing. So it was sort of a twofold process, because I didn't really have a ton of experience with, getting, basically pushing a project to events like this. Like as a musician, at this point in my career, I had enough experience that I'm sought after for performances, but having to shove something I'm doing in someone's face is a little bit of a new experience for me. So I had to get used to that very quickly.
Mm-hmm. And tell me a bit about the game. So this is Open Spaces.
Yeah. So Open Spaces is a visual novel, and it features 4 different characters of very disparate backgrounds. And it's about anxiety and agoraphobia. So anxiety is possibly the most commonly diagnosed mental illness on the planet, aside from depression. Agoraphobia, less so, but there is something of a high comorbidity with agoraphobia and social anxiety. I'm trying to remember the theme of the Ludum Dare we did that spawned the prototype. I think it was running out of space. Okay. And Mohua, who is now one of my colleagues at Queenship, she started talking about the idea of mental bandwidth and how mental illness really decreases the amount of mental bandwidth that you have to carry out day-to-day tasks, whether it's going to work, showering, anything that involves just living. So we just kind of went with it, and we've received a lot of really, really good feedback on it now that we've shipped the game, both from people who are sufferers, either diagnosed or undiagnosed, like, oh, this really spoke to me. I really love the way you portrayed the symptoms. I learned something about, how I can progress my wellness and get treatment for this. And also from community members who had a person, a spouse, a sibling, a parent, etc., with one of those diagnoses, that said, this helped me learn how to support them more effectively and taught me about the illness, which was really our goal. So it was just really, really great to get that kind of response from the final product. We are planning eventually an expansion of the original game, but that's a little bit further down the road.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to hearing more about that further down. You mentioned your team. How do you kind of work as a team, particularly obviously in the current situation? I assume you're kind of spread across different locations, and is it difficult to kind of work on your projects currently?
It is a bit, yeah. I moved to London in December, and before that, we were often able to gather together to work, even if it was only on like evenings or weekends. Both of my colleagues have like full-time day jobs. Mohua works for the New York Department of English Education, and I don't remember where my colleague Frederica works, but she is a quality control analyst for like engineering systems and software. So she is really spectacular. Both of them are. I'm very, very thankful to have them. But at some point we did discuss, the fact that it's easier for us to work when we're in the same room together, because it just helps our motivation. We can bounce ideas off each other. We can help each other with problem solving, that sort of thing. So that being said, the work has continued, obviously, but it is slower than it was before. Partly because everyone's working from home and everything just kind of seems a little bit more, how do we put it, laggy
Yeah.
than the everyday experience of just going to work. But we do talk to each other very often. We talk a lot on Discord. We have monthly meetings where we get together. So it's a little bit slower, but I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. So too long, don't read. We're coping more or less adequately.
Yeah. And are you looking for any kind of investment? That's the kind of side of the business that you're handling as well, right?
Mostly, yeah. I'm the only one on the team who has any experience with business finance. So that unfortunately falls to me. I have this daydream of being able to hire a business manager one day to handle all that stuff, so I don't have to do it. But we did get our first investment last summer, and we also got a grant through the Game Dev Accelerator program at Rensselaer Polytech. So that was very cool. But we are looking for maybe some smaller investments here and there. We're not necessarily looking for like a huge amount of investment, mostly because we do really care about retaining as much creative control as possible. Sorry, I'm a little phlegmy today. But small amounts, I guess.
Yeah.
More than investment, what we're really looking for is donors to our Patreon fund. So we can, share with people like the progress of the game making and, give them copies of the stuff that we're making and, that sort of thing.
Would you recommend that as a way to fundraise for your kind of projects in particular?
I have very mixed feelings about it, if I'm being honest. Patreon definitely has its advantages as a crowdfunding platform. The biggest one being obviously that it's super easy to just link share and invite people and message people about it. The downside is that, for every like Patreon success that you hear about, like Peter Hollins or somebody like that that's making literally like hundreds of thousands of dollars a month off of Patreon, there's 1,000 more artists who are getting, $20, $50, $100, that sort of thing. So I feel like if you sign up for Patreon, you need to anticipate playing a long game, because you have to really demonstrate that what you're doing is worth investing in. You have to maintain a certain amount of communication with your patrons. So you have to update regularly, that sort of thing. And then you have to follow through. No matter what, you have to follow through on the thing that you're making, whether you make changes to it or that sort of thing. Otherwise, people are going to feel cheated. And nobody wants that. Again, so
expectation, right?
Absolutely. But it's kind of just like, it's like building up a fan base on any other platform. You have to, be diligent and pay attention to it and put at least a few hours a week into, expanding that fan base. And eventually you will get to where you want to go. But it's, as opposed to a few months, I feel like it takes most Patreon artists a few years to really get to their financial goals with regular attention.
Yeah, totally. So can you tell me a bit more about your background as a classical musician? Because I'm really interested in this. You said that you kind of entered into games through that route. So can you tell me a bit about how you started and
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I started singing a little over 30 years ago. And I started with, school choir and church and all that sort of thing. I did all city choir, I did all state when I was growing up. And then, naturally having done all this music throughout, the entirety of my childhood and adolescence, I decided to major in music at school.
Is all state, is that, so that's, you're kind of competing against people across all the states?
Yeah, basically. So all state, that's all country. All state is a gathering of different choirs from across the individual state that you're competing in that have been especially selected after all city. So I got to do all state, I think 3 times during high school, and And it's really an experience. So, you know, you go and you put on the best performance that you possibly can, but you also get to see all these other amazing choruses, all these amazing singers, and you learn from them. You learn stage presence, technique, you know, all that sort of thing. You even learn, you know, new repertoire, new pieces that your choir master might want to work on. So it's really kind of a spectacular experience, especially if you don't take the competition angle too seriously. Like I like winning things, I guess, but I'm not super duper competitive. My shtick is like, you know, I'm going to prepare as best I can for this thing, and I'm just going to go and do the absolute best job I can. And if I win something, cool. If not, either way, I won something because I learned something.
That seems
so
like really
that's
good
kind of.
Sorry, I was going to say that seems like really good training for being in the games industry and you know, kind of exploring your own talent in a place that could be seen as competitive, but ultimately you're kind of learning from your peers, and you're kind of understanding your own talent within a kind of wider space of other talent.
Exactly. So my main instrument is voice, and I play a few other instruments. I play piano and viola. I studied percussion. I did woodwinds a little bit, but I don't really play woodwinds too much anymore, which is a little sad because I did really enjoy the clarinet.
Sorry, clarinet. You're right.
I know. But so let's see, where did I go? I went to Rhode Island College for 2 years for music, and then I went to SUNY Schenectady in upstate New York for 3 years for music. So I'm almost done with the degree, almost. But I got a degree in liberal arts from that same school and certificates in music and teaching assistantship. And now I'm basically 2 semesters away from finishing my undergrad in music. So hopefully I'll get to do that here in London. I'm kind of excited about it. But I started doing, you know, competitions when I was in college as well. And, you know, I still did chorus, and then I started doing, you know, full on recitals. And one day, to kind of get back to Geek Musica a little bit, I went to the dean of the music department. I said, what would you think about putting on a concert of video game and film scores? And he was just like, that sounds really cool, actually.
Yeah.
You know, if you get some scores together, you know, definitely come back and talk to me, and we'll try to get it together. So the long and the short of it was I didn't wind up really having enough time that semester to get the materials together that he wanted, because the life of a music major is incredibly busy. But it didn't really leave my mind. And eventually I was just like, I'm just going to make a band. We're just going to do this all the time. So that I started Geek Musica in 2015. So we're coming up on our 5th anniversary, I think, in August. And we just started performing shows. We performed at a number of different venues in Albany, and in that area. And we actually got a NISCA Arts grant one year to keep performing, which was exceptionally cool, because I was just like, hey, we don't have to practice without pay anymore. That's fantastic. So it's been a lot of fun. I haven't really done any work with Geek Musica since last summer, because, you know, obviously making the decision to move to a foreign country is a very time intensive and money intensive one. So I had to put a lot of stuff on the wayside while I was preparing for that. But I'm hoping to get back to that now that I'm, you know, kind of settled in London, at least for the foreseeable future.
And do you think that is the scene in London, the sort of games scene, is it very different from the scene in New York? Do you miss New York?
Do I miss New York? Oh, that's a question. I definitely miss my friends in New York. And I do miss the game development scene. There were a lot of indie devs in upstate New York. So I made a lot of friends among them, and I learned a lot from them. Do I miss New York as a collective whole? Definitely not. So I lived in Albany for 7 years, and then I lived in Troy for a year before I moved to London. And I loved Troy. I don't know if I love it enough that I want to go back and live there, but it was a nice little city, very artsy, very small business friendly, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Albany was just kind of a mess. not small business friendly, very segregated, not really a fun place to be. As far as London goes, I'm still kind of getting to know people. I was actually very surprised to be invited to interview with you guys on the podcast. I was just like, oh, that's so great. People think what we're doing is cool, so yay. But the people I've met so far have been very welcoming and very friendly. So I hope in time to do more work and engagement with them, and maybe collab on some projects and that sort of thing, and make some friends.
Fantastic. Well, you're very welcome. We love having more people here. That's great. So yeah, and it'll be really interesting to kind of to see if in a year's time maybe you have a preference, or you feel strongly one way or the other. New York is very I think New York is very it's a bit of a kind of fantasy land in the UK. I know the first time I went to New York, it was like a few years ago now, and I was kind of ready to be disappointed, because it kind of looms so large in your imagination if you're like a city dweller and a city lover, which I am. And I got there and I was like, oh no, it's actually amazing. Damn.
No, the city is like a whole other planet almost.
Yeah.
But when I tell people I lived in New York, right? They always think it was, oh, I'm so sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry, I spoke over you. But the state is so different, right? The state is I kind of imagine this very like autumnal kind of imagery, and they always say upstate New York is a completely different kind of wilderness. And is that fair? Is that
It is not untrue. One thing I did really enjoy about living in upstate New York was, the nearness of nature, because I love, hiking and climbing and swimming and all that kind of stuff. So, the Adirondacks are basically right on your doorstep. The Great Lakes kind of, not like basically a day's drive. There's like, the Finger Lakes district. There's Lake George. There's all kinds of like really beautiful nature spots so you can jump out and, kind of get your feet dirty. But it is a very different kind of community from the city. And pretty much all of upstate New York is like that. It's just very, very different. The city is very wild and energetic and artsy and, fierce. And upstate New York is just like everybody just kind of casually going about their business. Lots of picket fences, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it is beautiful. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. No, I'd love to see more of it one day. But yeah, I think saying, yeah, I've come here from New York, I think that's going to make you really cool with people here.
Excellent.
So when you're not when you're not making games, what kind of games do you enjoy? And are there any particular games out there right now that you think our viewers should be playing?
I've always loved RPG style video games. So the Final Fantasy franchise is among my top favorites. I love Legends of Zelda, anything like that. Just lately, what have I been playing lately? I play Final Fantasy 14 online, which is a really fantastic game if you like, really story-rich MMORPGs. Like everybody else, I play a lot of Stardew Valley because it's just so wholesome and great. I've been playing Gree a little bit, and it was recommended to me when I first started Queenship because it's really very about the cognitive process of trauma and grief and all that sort of thing. So occasionally I've gone back to replay it. It's a very, how do I describe it? It is a very cerebral game. It really does make you think. It's so expertly crafted. I can't really like fully voice how I feel about it, but it is a very emotive and very cognitive kind of experience. So, if anyone watching this has not played it, do recommend. So on the fun side of things, I've also been playing a game called Monster Prom, where you you choose what like a monster character, and you kind of have to go around and like flirt with all the, you know, the school hotties to get a date for the prom. So and there's all these different scenarios and all these different outcomes that you can get throughout the game. So it's really kind of a nice indie release. Weirdly enough, I've also been playing Bloodborne a little bit.
Okay,
which
all right.
is, you know, a little bit on the older side, but has held its value very well. But I can't play it for very long at a time because it is dark.
Yeah.
So if you gross out easily or you get depressed easily, not for you.
Mm-hmm. And if you're easily like challenged, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit. But story is really, really good.
So when you're not playing games and you're not playing music, do you have any other creative outlets or hobbies?
I do. I crochet a lot. Yeah. Yeah, although not just lately, unfortunately, I still have to build up my yarn supply again now that I'm kind of settled. But I live near some really lovely woods that have a lot of hiking trails. I've been able to go walking and hiking again. What else do I do? I'm one of those people that does work for fun, so I'm never really totally sure how to answer this question. I do really love puzzle games, and you know, like word searches, crosswords, that sort of thing. So I do that sometimes, and I read a lot. Just lately, I've been reading a lot of historical fiction because clearly I just want to terrorize myself. And I've also been reading a lot of books on foraging. So,
okay. So we can expect some interesting culinary explorations there, or
definitely.
Exciting.
London surprisingly has a lot of wild food. I think everybody assumes that, you know, because London's like a big city, that there's like no green space, and there's like a ton of green space. But like in my backyard, we have a grape tree, we have an elderberry tree, and we have blackberries. So, and there's like, you know, the woods right on the doorstep. Hampstead Heath is right down the road. So it's just like, this is going to be so much fun.
Is there a foraging game, do you think? I don't know. Because that would be cool, right?
It would actually be really cool. It probably is. I think Stardew Valley is probably the closest thing I can think of, because you can forage a lot.
I mean, there are already so many game mechanics about, you know, like gathering food and mixing food together and cooking and things like that. So yeah, kind of forage them up would be kind of cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. There is one game I think that does require a lot of foraging, but maybe not in the way that people think. It's a game called Frostpunk. And the object of the game is to guide your people to this location after the advent of a nuclear winter, and basically like forage as much material as you can to like basically keep everyone alive. But kind of like Bloodborne, it is also very depressing. So maybe not to be played if you're not in a good mood.
I like the idea of Bloodborne meets foraging. That's very, that's an interesting mix of wholesome and not so wholesome.
Exactly.
So you must be super busy. Do you have to protect yourself from overworking or burnout? And what are your methods for doing
that? Absolutely, yeah. As I'm sure, you know, every single other game dev can attest, it is a very busy job. There's always something to do. There's always fires to put out. I think to start with, I'd have to talk a little bit about Queenship's philosophy about work. So we have what is referred to as a results-only work environment. So basically, everybody who works at Queenship works when and where they work best. So if that means you've got the energy to plow through a 10-hour day, cool. If you can only do 2 hours, you know, at like 1 p.m. in the afternoon, also cool. So the idea is to really work smart as opposed to hard, and you just kind of work in accordance with your own, you know, ability without really, you know, taxing yourself too much. I think like most game devs, I'm a bit of a workaholic, so I do sort of have to hold myself to the idea that, like, you know what, no, I'm tired and done. There are some days where I have a lot of energy and I'm able to get a great deal done. But if I find myself having to force what I'm doing, I know that I'm not going to do my best work, and I know it's time to hang it up and do something else, at least for a while. So we really do kind of encourage each other, as is to be expected. We make games about mental health to really, take care of ourselves and each other, and to just kind of do what you need to do to make sure that you're in your own best state. Like, one of my colleagues took several months off because she was having a lot of difficulty with her mental health, and she was very, very anxious because she's used to, like, the standard way of doing things, that I was gonna fire her for needing to take time off. And I was just like, are you crazy? No. That would be such a terrible thing to do. No, like, you go off and you do whatever it is you need to do to get yourself back where you're prepared to return to the work, and the work will be here whenever you get back. So we just kind of make do. I took some time off over the winter, for similar reasons. Winter is always a pretty hard time for me. So I think it took about a month and a half off, really, from doing most work activities. And I got back to it in the spring, but my colleagues just kept doing what they were doing in the background, and it was just like, oh, this is what we did while you were away. Okay, cool. Another colleague had some pretty serious family stuff, like, her mom was sick. So she was away for, like, I think about 6 months, actually, because her mother was in very ill health and she had to make that her priority. Plus she has a young child at home. But she had the same concern. She was just like, are you gonna, if you want to replace me, that's fine. I'm just like, I do not want to replace you. Like, no, you do what you need to do. So we do try to check on each other, at least from time to time, just to see, if the other person needs help, or they might need just a listening ear, that sort of thing. So we do try to hold each other accountable. Sounds like a strong word, but we try to hold each other to the idea that you don't have to work all the time.
Yeah, that doesn't have to be the whole of you. And
absolutely.
This is kind of, I like to ask about kind of other hobbies and other things that people like to do, because I think it's important to enrich the kind of games you make by looking at other art forms and things. But it's also important to have somewhere that you can just like, sometimes you just have days where you're like, I don't want to look at or think about games, because it's just kind of, the balance is off, and I want to be someone else for a bit.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you when you're working, do you have any kind of I don't know, like, preparation rituals, or like spaces where you particularly like to work, or particular music you like to listen to?
Well, when I lived in New York, I worked at a co-op kind of co-working space called the Tech Valley Game Space, and that is housed within what is called the Tech Valley Center of Gravity. So it's just this really fantastic co-working space that's super duper outfitted with just about everything techie you could possibly want to make stuff with. So there's the co-working section, which is usually where the game devs wind up working. We have a kitchen, there's a couple of conference rooms, there's a whole machine room in the basement with, like, tools and woodworking, and it's really cool. If you ever get around Troy, it's a really great place to check out. There's a sewing section, there's a game library that the game space keeps upstairs, partly for fun and partly for research, because part of our work is playing games and figuring out what's good and what isn't so good. But I do really miss the community there, but I'm sort of poking around for another co-working space like it, because I was able to be very productive when I went there. I think part of the struggle of working remotely ever is you're just like, but I'm in my pajamas. I can't get myself into that, mode of I'm at work. Whereas, if you're able to go to a co-working space, even if you just the kind of person that takes your work everywhere with you, it helps you get into the mode of I'm at work. So I did really enjoy working there. After I left London, I mostly worked in the library. London has a lot of really great library spaces. So I used it very similarly, but now it's just like, I'm in my bedroom though. But me and my partner just moved to a new flat, and our room isn't so much a room as it is kind of a suite. So we do have like a little bit of an office space, which is what I'm sitting in right now. So we've set it up to be conducive to both, gaming and just everyday work. And that has been super helpful for my productivity. But I do kind of miss working at the library some days, even though I have a kind of an office now. So.
I think, the libraries, the whole idea of a library is just so fundamentally pleasing and kind of romantic. The idea of being surrounded by the world's knowledge, and I think that could be really inspiring for being creative.
Definitely, it was very inspiring.
So what are you working on right now, and what's kind of next for Queenship Games?
Well, we actually have several projects that we're working on right now. The one at the forefront is actually an app, which is our first foray into app making, and we're making an app called Return to Self, and it's intended to assist users in managing panic and anxiety attacks. So we are very hopeful that it will meaningfully help people. But we're also kind of arranging it to just be helpful to people who suffer from anxiety in general. So we're hoping to have that shipped by the end of summer. There's still, some build outs that we're working on, and there's still some art assets that we have to finish. But we're very much in the heavy production mode right now. So we hope to be testing, I think, probably mid-July. So that's the big, front burner thing going right now. The other project is an RPG game called The Shadow Cross, and it is about the experience of depression. So that is obviously going to be a little more challenging. We're hoping to make it, at least several hours worth of play, but the experience of depression is a very challenging one. And, pardon me for being so serious, but depression is an illness and it does kill people. So part of what we're trying to do with the game, aside from, help users connect or players connect with, more meaningfully with their diagnosis and, help them find ways of managing it, we're really hoping to illustrate that experience to people that don't have depression. So they can be, similarly with Open Spaces, they can support people that they know and love that have that diagnosis. But depression, along with anxiety, is sort of a near and dear thing to our heart because most of the team actually has depression. So it's sort of important that we, convey the importance of, being sensitive to that diagnosis and that it really does need support just as much as any other illness. I think last but not least is a game about hallucinations that we've been working on. That's sort of back burner right now because we do need a new Unity programmer before we can continue working on that. But similar to our other games, we're hoping that it'll kind of help illustrate the experience of having hallucinations. Hallucinations are surprisingly common.
Right.
Most people will hallucinate at least a few times during their lives, even if they haven't been diagnosed with a mental illness that features hallucinations. Stress can do it, grief can do it. So we're really sort of hoping to, demonstrate that as not an experience purely for people who are mentally ill, but as such as a human experience. We've got some other ideas. But it'll probably be a couple of years before we really get to work meaningfully on any of them because we sort of have our hands full right now. But we're hoping to have Shadow Cross out by the end of 2021. So, knock on wood.
Yeah, no, that's extraordinary, and these you're kind of dealing with the big issues and kind of it feels like this is the right team to kind of be confronting that stuff with kind of insight and sensitivity. So we hope so.
we're really trying to, I think we're really trying to change the narrative about mental illness. And, you know, that's a dialogue that's been going on for quite some time, you know, the commonality of it, you know, dispelling the idea that people who suffer from mental illness are somehow dangerous, you know, all this sort of thing. So it's, you know, in addition to being, you know, a very personal kind of thing, we're hoping not only to, you know, help people with diagnoses, but to change the perception of people with those diagnoses. So if we've been even partially successful, we've done our job, I think.
Sure.
But we do a lot of research, obviously, and we do talk with, you know, psychologists and social workers and peer advocates, you know, as much as possible, to make sure that we're, you know, portraying the symptoms in a realistic and sensitive way. So we try to do our best with it, I guess. You know, we're probably going to make mistakes along the way, because, you know, no game is perfect. But so far, from what we hear, we're doing a good job. So we're just going to try to keep doing a good job.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And if people want to find out more about the project, more about you, what are the kind of social media channels they should be looking at?
They can find us on Facebook as Queenship Game Studio, Twitter at Queenship Games, and as mentioned on Patreon, patreon.com/Queenship Game Studio. We're on LinkedIn, but, you know, I don't know if really a lot of people pay attention to us on LinkedIn. So
I think LinkedIn it's that secret. It can be a bit of a secret weapon, I think, in business development, because and you kind of forget about it, and it's at the back of your mind a bit. One thing I've become aware of recently is that it's not necessarily at the back of the mind of white men. You know, they are using it, and I think that's something to be kind of aware of, that, you know, there are channels of conversation that are going on, and you're like, I had no idea that people were connecting in that way and using that, you know, boring platform. You know, there's kind of perceptions around it that just make you assume that, who cares? But then a lot of business development and connections, and even potential investment connections, might be happening on there.
Definitely.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, really easy to like delete yourself from the conversation by not being aware of that. So yeah, I've been thinking about that a bit lately, and yeah, the kind of, you know, they used to say all the business is done on the golf course, like maybe it's now being done on LinkedIn. And we should be,
you know, you know, you are right. I had not previously thought of it that way, so I guess I should start.
It was a bit of a lightning bolt moment for me, where I went, oh, okay. I should probably,
we cannot let them have all the fun.
Password is. So I'll see you on LinkedIn.
Definitely. No, definitely.
Yeah, but yeah, I encourage everyone to go and find out more about what you're doing, and yeah, just wish you the best of luck. Thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Likewise, thank you.